The film opens with Jamie Ashen tinkering with a sink in his home. His wife Lisa teases him, saying the repair is beyond his skills and they'll need a plumber. But first, they'll have to order food from the restaurant. As they share a tender kiss, the doorbell rings unexpectedly. Jamie opens the door to find a box addressed to his name, but the doorstep is empty and no one is around. He brings the box inside. Lisa asks about it, but Jamie is completely clueless. They swiftly unwrap the box and find a classic ventriloquist's puppet inside. They search the box for a clue about the cinder, but it has no identifying information. However, Lisa quickly becomes fond of the puppet and begins to entertain Jamie with its playful antics. Despite her amusement, Jamie remains unsettled, troubled by the mystery of the cinder. The puppet prompts Lisa to recall a childhood story often told to frighten children. The story of Mary Shaw, a witch with numerous puppets, who would kill and tear out the tongues of anyone who screamed upon seeing her, but Jamie dismisses the story as childish. Lisa places the puppet down, and they both watch it intently. To their shock, its mouth opens by itself, creating an unsettling scene. Later, Jamie arrives to get dinner from a Chinese restaurant. Meanwhile, Lisa sits the puppet on her bed and starts pulling items from the cupboard. Suddenly, she feels a creepy breathing noise. When she turns around, she finds the puppet lying on its own and its eyes fixed intently on her. She brushes off the incident and decides to play a prank on Jamie. She returns the puppet to its original position on the pillow, drapes it with a white sheet, and arranges it precisely to scare Jamie. After a while, the stereo in the lobby suddenly begins to distort. As she goes to check, the stereo emits strange noises. The kettle on the stove lets out a loud whistle, and the clock ticks erratically before abruptly stopping. Her face betrays visible fear. At that moment, a child's creepy laughter echoes from the bedroom. She follows the sound into the room. The voice she hears belongs to the puppet. As she cautiously approaches to remove the cloth, it wraps itself around Lisa on its own. In a panic, she tries to pull the cloth off, but an invisible force hurls her away near the gate. She emerges from the clothes and blood pours from her mouth. As she turns around in horror, the puppet drags her toward itself, and she lets out a terrified scream. After some time, Jamie returns home. As he enters the kitchen, he is alarmed to find the kettle emitting thick smoke. He quickly shuts off the gas, muttering about Lisa's carelessness. He calls her several times, but there's no response. Heading toward the bedroom, he is shocked to find blood smeared on the floor. Lisa's voice then comes from the bedroom, calling him inside with an affectionate tone. When Jamie enters, he sees Lisa sitting on the bed covered with a cloth. Assuming it's a prank, he tells her to stop joking. But as he pulls back the cloth, he is filled with terror at the sight. Lisa's mouth was torn and was brutally killed, her tongue viciously sliced off in the process. In the next scene, Detective Lipton interrogates Jamie about the murder. He completely suspects him because the evidence and events seem overwhelmingly stacked against him, leading Lipton to press him for a confession, but Jamie insists on his innocence and also mentions the anonymous puppet, and this can't be a coincidence that it was sent to him shortly before Lisa's murder. He brings up the story of Mary Shaw because Lisa's death matches the events described in the tale. Lipton dismisses it, thinking the idea of a puppet being involved in the murder is unreasonable. However, in the absence of concrete evidence against Jamie, Lipton decides to release him temporarily. Upon returning home, he commits to uncovering the truth behind Lisa's death. He examines the puppet and discovers that its name is Billy. He searches through the box, tears apart the packaging, and uncovers Mary Shaw and Billy. He is astonished to realize that the story of Mary Shaw is not a hoax but a reality. Another shock is that Raven's Fair mentioned on the box is Jamie's hometown. Taking Billy, he promptly departs for Raven's Fair. After undertaking an extensive journey, the city turns out to be a desolate and barren town. After some time, he arrives at his father's mansion, only to be warmly greeted by Ayla, but he does not recognize her. She reveals that she is his father's third wife. Although Jamie is completely unaware of this because he was estranged from his father for years due to a strained relationship and his father's abrasive behavior. As a result, he is shocked to discover that his father, Edward Ashen, is now permanently in a wheelchair due to a stroke. Edward expresses his sorrow over Lisa's death and is also delighted to see Jamie again after such a long time. Jamie seeks to uncover the truth about the Mary Shaw story from Edward, but he also dismisses it as only a superstitious tale used to scare children. They urge Jamie to move on from his grief and persuade him to stay with them. Despite their repeated efforts to convince him, Jamie ultimately decides to leave. He then arrives at Henry's place, who manages the Raven's Fair's funeral home and prepares the coffins for the deceased. Henry informs Jamie that the police will release Lisa's body today, and he plans to prepare a coffin tonight and hold her funeral the following day. As Jamie is leaving Henry's house, he notices Henry's wife Marion, who appears to be mentally unstable. After, Jamie checks into a motel to spend the night and tries to sleep. After a while, Billy turns his eyes towards him. Just then Jamie hears Lisa's voice calling him, and he is horrified to see Billy staring at him. Then he gets the illusion that a lady is sitting on the chair. When he turns on the lights, she disappears. Here, Henry brings Lisa's body from the police station to his home, where he begins preparing a coffin for her. He steps backward in shock as he opens Lisa's face, his fear growing at the unexpected sight. Suddenly, he hears Marion's voice in the distance. Following the sound, he enters a hidden compartment where Marion sits inside, although she frequently hides in it due to an unknown fear. Henry gently calms her, guiding her out of the compartment and encouraging her to head to her room. Then, overwhelmed by fear, he shakily takes a photograph of Lisa. The next day, Jamie conducts Lisa's funeral, attended by his closest friends and family. While strolling through the cemetery, Jamie suddenly spots the same lady he saw at the motel, only to watch her disappear once again. Jamie follows the mysterious lady to a grave. Suddenly, Marion emerges from behind him, stopping him from approaching to the grave. She warns him that Mary Shaw is responsible for Lisa's death and come after him next. Henry arrives, intervening to calm her, and explains to Jamie that Marion is mentally disturbed, but before leaving, Marion repeatedly urges him to bury Billy back in his grave. Jamie struggles to make sense of it all. Then he clears the bushes and finds the grave is Mary Shaw's. Alerted by Marion, Jamie brings Billy to the Raven's Fair Cemetery late at night. Inside, he searches through the numerous children's graves near Mary Shaw's resting place. After a tense search, he finally locates Billy's grave. He removes the soil and discovers the grave is empty. He wonders who could have taken it out. As Jamie places Billy into the grave, Billy's face turns toward him. Despite this, he closes the coffin and gets back into his car. He is about to start the car. A shadow repeatedly looms around it, accompanied by spooky laughter. Despite his fear, he exits the car and searches the area but finds no one there. He convinces himself it was just an illusion. Upon returning to his motel, he enters his room after freshening up, only to be startled to find Billy there, with Lipton already present. It's revealed that Lipton has been surveilling Jamie for an extended period and has brought Billy back from the grave. Lipton inquires about Billy and the reason for his burial, leading to an increase in his suspicion toward Jamie. Jamie points out once again that Billy was sent to him just before Lisa's death and recounts Mary Shaw's story to justify why he buried Billy. Lipton becomes skeptical, suspecting that Jamie buried Billy to conceal evidence related to Lisa's death. Jamie reveals that he is trying to find out the sender of the parcel because he suspects that the sender might be connected to Lisa's murder. Lipton tells him that it is his job to find the culprit, not Jamie's. He takes Billy and lets Jamie know that he's staying in the room next to him. Jamie peeks through the gate to confirm, which turns out to be true. He spends the night obsessed with the mystery of Billy and Mary Shaw, eventually realizing Marion must know something crucial. The next morning, Jamie somehow manages to retrieve Billy from the Lipton and reaches Henry's home. Inside, he shows Billy to Marion to learn everything about it. Upon seeing Billy, Marion acts unusually disturbed. Henry calms her and expresses surprise at seeing Billy with Jamie and warning him that Billy is extremely dangerous. Jamie presses Henry to share any information he might have about the matter. Then Henry recounts his childhood, unveiling the story of Mary and Billy. At that time, Raven's Fair was in its glory days. A renowned theater opened on Lost Lake, where Mary Shaw performed her ventriloquist acts with her puppets. One day, 12-year-old Henry attended her shows for the first time. Mary takes the stage for her performance, repeatedly calling for Billy and searching for him. Then Billy's voice comes from beneath Henry's chair. Henry retrieves Billy and hands him over to Mary. Mary's skills were so exceptional that no one could tell she was speaking rather than the puppet. She delivered a captivating and humorous performance, enchanting the entire audience. Suddenly, a child named Michael spoke up, claiming he had seen Mary moving her lips and knew she was speaking instead of the puppet. Nevertheless, she would get enraged whenever someone referred to her dolls as puppets, as she considered them to be her children. Despite this, Mary continues her act, playfully scaring Michael by performing with Billy. She eventually demonstrates to Michael that the voice is indeed coming from Billy, not from her. After finishing her act, she gives Michael a stern look. Then, Michael disappeared a week after the act, and no one knew what happened to him. A few days later, Mary was brutally murdered, and her death remains a mystery to this day. Afterward, her body was taken to Henry's father's morgue to honor her final wish. She wanted to be transformed into a puppet and buried alongside her 101 other puppets. That same night, Henry goes to the basement to see Mary's body. In a moment of clumsiness, he accidentally drops the coffin. Her horrifying face causes him to step back in fear. Hearing the noise, Henry's father rushes to the basement. Unfortunately, Mary attacks his father and kills him. Mary was also the one who pushed Marion to the verge of madness. Eventually, the townspeople buried her alongside her puppets. Following this, Raven's Fair has been plagued by a series of deaths. Anyone who screamed upon seeing her was killed and their tongues were extracted. Henry reveals that after seeing Lisa's dead body, he understood Mary Shaw was behind it, but out of fear, he kept it to himself. Henry did not know anything else apart from this, nor did he know who might have parceled Billy to Jamie. However, he suggests that to uncover more secrets, Jamie should visit the theater where Mary used to live. He immediately heads to the theater. Meanwhile, Lipton arrives at the cemetery and begins digging up the graves of Mary Shaw's puppets. Eventually, Jamie arrives at the theater near Loess Lake, only to find it and the surrounding area severely burned and abandoned. He crosses the lake by boat and arrives at the theater's entrance. Inside, he sees the theater is utterly devastated, with every item damaged and coated in layers of dust. Then, his attention is drawn to a towering iron bridge high above. He reaches the iron bridge but finds it severely rusted and unstable. However, he carefully crosses it and cautiously makes his way through the corridor to enter Mary Shaw's room. Inside the room, he finds several of Mary Shaw's belongings, including a puppet and posters from her and Billy's performance. He then comes across a trunk. After rummaging through it, he discovers a book that belonged to Mary Shaw, which contains secrets and techniques for crafting ventriloquist puppets of various types like men, women, and children. Even the methods for transforming a human into a puppet. On the next page, he finds Michael's picture alongside a newspaper article about his disappearance. It's the same boy who exposed Mary Shaw. The boy's real name turns out to be Michael Ashen. Notably, his surname indicates that he belongs to Jamie's family. After seeing this, Jamie is bewildered, and countless questions flood his mind. To find answers to his questions, he leaves the theater for his father's house. At Henry's home, Marion talks with Billy alone, desperately pleading for him to spare both her and Henry's lives. Henry is horrified by the sight and decides to return Billy to his grave. He takes Billy to the basement, places him down, and begins searching for a shovel. As Henry rummages through the basement, Billy's eyes shift toward him. Suddenly, he hears Marion crying from the hidden compartment. He becomes irritated with her again and enters the compartment to pull her out. Billy turns his face toward him once more. Inside the compartment, Henry repeatedly searches for her with the help of a flashlight, calling out her name, but he cannot find her. Then the sound of Marion crying starts again from the front. Henry follows the sound and approaches, only to find that it is not Marion but a puppet. Suddenly, the compartment door closes automatically. He rushes to the gate and tries to open it, repeatedly calling out for Marion's help, but to no avail. Just then, he hears Mary Shaw calling him from behind. Turning around, he sees her smiling. Terrified, he screams, then Mary attacks him, tearing his face apart and ripping out his tongue. Meanwhile, Jamie confronts his father Edward at his home, demanding to know about Michael Ashen's connection to their family and Mary Shaw. He furiously insists that Edward disclose all the secrets he's been hiding about Mary Shaw, seeking an explanation for why she killed Lisa. Edward reveals that Michael Ashen was Jamie's granduncle who suddenly disappeared one day and was never found again. Michael's family suspects Mary Shaw, and together with some people from Raven's Fair, they attack Mary, force her to scream, cut out her tongue, and kill her brutally. She dies, but her spirit later creates havoc in Raven's Fair and kills all her murderers and their families one by one. This was the reason why Edward always kept Jamie away from him so that Mary Shaw could not reach him. Her dream is to wipe out every trace of the Ashens. Also, the true cause behind the deaths of Jamie's first two mothers was not Edward, but Mary Shaw. Jamie is consumed with rage and determined to destroy Mary Shaw forever. He is about to leave the place when Lipton intervenes and threatens to arrest him for tampering with evidence. Jamie is baffled by his accusations. Lipton explains that he went to take out Mary Shaw's puppets from the graves, but found all the graves were already empty, which casts suspicion on Jamie. Jamie denies the accusation, leading to a heated argument between them. Then Ayla intervenes and informs Jamie there's a call for him. On the call, it's Mary Shaw in Henry's voice, who calls Jamie and urges him to come to the theater to prove his innocence to the police. He informs Lipton about it and takes an excuse to leave, but Lipton tries to stop him. In his urgency, Jamie pushes him aside, takes his car, and drives off toward the theater. Lipton also chases after him in his car. Jamie arrives at the theater, carrying the lamp, and takes the boat to the entrance. Meanwhile, Lipton heads towards the theater. Inside the theater, Jamie searches for Henry, calling out his name over and over, but receives no response. Suddenly, Henry's voice echoes through the theater, calling Jamie to come upstairs. Jamie crosses the iron bridge and enters the corridor as Henry's voice instructs him to come to Mary Shaw's room. He enters the room and begins calling out softly for Henry when Lipton suddenly appears from behind, pointing a gun at him and commanding him to stop the nonsense drama, exhausted by his repeated antics. Then Henry's voice calls them upstairs by their names. This convinces Lipton to believe everything Jamie has said, but Jamie is surprised that he knows Lipton's name, leading him to suspect that it might be Mary Shaw, not Henry. Jamie locates a staircase leading to the top floor. They both ascend and enter a room where Mary Shaw used to craft her puppets, which is filled with a large collection of dummies and their raw materials. Then a puppet hits Lipton's feet, and he throws it aside, causing the curtain to fall. Behind it, all the puppets are revealed, neatly stored on their shelves, except for Billy. Now the mystery is who could have brought them here from the graveyard? Jamie's eyes land on something covered with a cloth. He removes the cloth to reveal it's Michael Ashen's puppet. Then a flashback reveals that Mary kidnaps him and turns him into a puppet after killing him. Suddenly, all the puppets turn their eyes to the left one by one, drawing Jamie and Lipton's attention to a clown puppet, and Mary Shaw's voice emerges. Jamie demands to know her intentions. Mary Shaw responds that she vows to eliminate every member of the Ashen's family, along with their descendants one by one. Jamie asks why she killed Lisa. She calls him closer to answer it. As Jamie listens intently, she reveals that Lisa was pregnant with the next Ashen heir, which is why she was targeted. He is stunned and profoundly distressed by this revelation. Mary sticks out her tongue and laughs loudly, trying to scare them. They keep one thing in mind: they must not scream under any circumstances. Then, Lipton destroys the puppet with his gun. Mary then possesses another puppet, which Lipton destroys again. He continues to destroy more puppets in the same manner. Jamie realizes that Mary's puppets are her source of power, so he sets them all on fire. As the flames spread, they flee from the scene. The fire quickly engulfs the entire theater, and both of them hastily make their escape from the theater. But they neglect to burn Michael's puppet. As soon as they reach the iron bridge, it collapses while crossing. Lipton loses his footing and falls. But before he hits the ground, Mary seizes him and kills him brutally. Jamie is hanging from the bridge, and as he tries to climb up, Mary shoves him down, sending him plunging into the lake. Despite this, Jamie manages to swim across the lake, evade Mary, and safely escape from the theater, which is now completely engulfed in flames. He gets into the car. As he is ready to leave, he realizes that he hasn't destroyed Billy yet. He arrives at Henry's house with the intent to finish Billy, but Henry is nowhere to be found. The house is entirely deserted. Suddenly, he hears Marion's cries coming from the basement. He descends to the basement and finds Henry lying dead in Marion's lap. He calms Marion down and inquires about Billy. She reveals the shocking truth that her father Edward has taken Billy. Jamie is puzzled by this, knowing that Edward is unable to move from his wheelchair. He arrives at his father's house, which is shrouded in darkness. Neither Edward nor Ayla is anywhere to be found. He frantically races through the house, searching for Billy in a panic. After a desperate search, he enters into a room. Edward's voice echoes from the cradle. Jamie pulls back the cloth from the cradle and discovers Billy lying in it. Suddenly, Mary lunges at him from behind, but Jamie quickly reacts and throws Billy into the fireplace. As Billy burns, Mary cries out in pain and then disappears. Jamie lets out a sigh of relief. Then he notices Edward in front. He turns on the light and approaches him, but when he touches Edward, his head suddenly drops. He looks at Edward from behind and discovers that Edward has been transformed into a puppet. The film then reveals a series of twists, showing that Ayla was behind everything from the beginning. She had killed Edward, turned him into a puppet, and had been deceiving Jamie for many days by controlling Edward. Ayla was the one who killed Lisa by sending Billy to Jamie's house and spoke to Jamie using Henry's voice. The book Jamie found is also revealed, featuring a page with a picture of Ayla. Then, Ayla appears behind Jamie in her true face as Mary Shaw, but this time, Jamie screams in terror and the movie ends with his death.
If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and turn on all notifications to stay updated with our latest content. Additionally, if you'd like to see amazing Indian movie explanations, give this video a thumbs up and type yes in the comments.